Yeah, we will be talking about many things, but especially about the solar energy that was the thing that linked us. When I was developing EcoDrive X in Sweden, I connected with Niels through Science Park. And so we started to talk about the solar industry, how to make this solar energy phenomenon like a democratic and fair movement that help the most of the people.
Yes, I was born in Germany and studied in Sweden and in Stockholm to be more precise, and in Germany at RWTH Aachen. And I've always had like two main fields of interest in my life. This one field is basically everything about energy, the energy transition, electric vehicle, and especially transition to renewable energy. But the other side was always social justice. And I've always wanted to combine these two fields. And this is kind of what connected us, I think, one, that we both strive for making the energy transition a more democratic thing, like you
Yeah,
introduced.
since I was a student in the first years of the university, my bachelor, I saw like this unfair kind of system that we have in Spain. We have a lot of sun, and we have a lot of potential to put solar panels and do installations, but there are not solar panels in family or shared buildings, right? And that was something that was mind blowing for me because almost everyone in Spain lives in big buildings, 2/3 of the population, more or less.
The problem is basically that the vast majority of our society lives in cities, in flats and apartments, and they basically do not own the roof, or they own the roof collectively. And we've always thought how we could use collective schemes in order to introduce solar energy. And 2 years ago, I worked on the Canary Islands on a project which was about energy communities. And energy communities or energy sharing basically allows people and neighbors to connect themselves and jointly use solar or renewable energy. And I found this concept that interesting that I wrote my bachelor thesis about this concept as well, in particular about Spain. They allow a very easy, unbureaucratic, at least in the law, system to allow neighbors in a circle of 2 kilometers to share energy amongst each other. I did a 2-month research project in Barcelona to explore this concept further.
Nice, super interesting. And I would like to dig a little bit deeper in your day-to-day routine because you were innovation manager intern, right, in this project, right?
Exactly. I think the title, or what's hidden behind the title, is basically business development and stakeholder management. So kind of trying to get the overview of the project, because we have very, very skilled and motivated teams, but the marketing team, for instance, was lacking the technical expertise, and the technical department was lacking the social component, so to say, or the business component. And as I hold a business administration and electric engineering degree, I try to link these departments and compartments together and try to create the synergy between those. I don't think there exists something like a typical day. One task would be like purchase a domain or deal with all the topics that come along with a domain purchase. And then after purchasing this domain, I headed to a call where we discussed the financial model, and then directly afterwards meeting with the marketing guys, because they were asking about some technical components. What are we using? How can we communicate this properly? Or they wanted some figures. So a typical day does not exist, but this is all about innovation. I think innovation is always very rapid changes and a very dynamic environment as well.
Normally, when you are an entrepreneur, and sometimes, let's say it like that, you are not really academic, or the typical example of the famous entrepreneur Steve Jobs that didn't finish the university and so on. But before this meeting, I was checking a little bit more in depth your LinkedIn profile, and I saw that you have like recognitions as a student. You have like a strong academic background, also because you studied the solar industry in your master thesis. So I would like to tell you to tell me like some thoughts about this, and how can you manage to mix those two worlds, a little bit your experience.
from my experience, the entrepreneurial or the startup world is something on its own that can't be really studied in university. You can be given a tool set from university, but the environment out there is very dynamic. You can't properly study this in academia. But what you can learn in academia is basically a skill set like problem solving, structuring your day. And especially, I think the greatest thing that I learned during university is basically structuring myself. I think academia can open very, very much doors. So for my in my case, it was so that I finished very, very good from university, that I hold a bachelor degree, and this gives me some sort of security by now, because I can always go back to academia, and I think this is always great to have a solid foundation that you can always rely on.
I studied strategic entrepreneurship in Sweden, and the school was really good at studying this field, which for me was a little bit like at the beginning contradictory, right? Because you always find something that you have to actually do and put in practice. But yeah, it's good to understand the theory. But for example, we have a subject which was international marketing during the program, which was really connected to the job market and the needs of the world, because we were actually consulting a company that wanted to expand to the Spanish market. So we were doing a lot of consultants and working with them. We went to the factory, we saw their facilities, how they operate, everything, and then we wrote a report. And I really enjoyed that one. And I think it should be a little bit more like that. It's important to have a little bit of theory, but I will prefer as an entrepreneur to have a little bit more of practice, right? And make things happen.
This is always the problem with academia, that it lacks a bit of pragmatism. So in theory, everything looks cool. And I think we can further talk about the Spanish concept as well, because in theory and in the law, it looks super decent, it looks super cool. But when you start setting up these projects in practice, and you did this as well, you're suddenly facing like hidden problems that no one thought of and that can't be explored in theory or in academia. So you really need to step out of your comfort zone and start get going. And this is the greatest difference, I guess, between academia and the problem about academia.
Because when we started EcoDriveX, I mean, it seemed clear, right? Like you can have solar panels, you don't need to invest initial investment, you can finance it, you can save money from the very first day. The installation is one day. Like everything are advantages. There are some barriers, of course, right? But we found more or less the way to circumvent those barriers and eliminate all the friction and make this happen. But we struggled a lot to find customers. We had potential customers, but there are still like some things to mature in the market, like the awareness of the solutions, the bureaucratics behind it, the commercial electric companies facilitate this process as well. All these kinds of things that you cannot really see in theory. Some of them, yes, if you do a proper market research and environment research about the industry. But then when you go to a building meeting, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it's much more challenging than talk to investors and do an elevator pitch, because they have many questions. And what if you screw the ceiling? What happens? And what if you don't put the right angle in the solar panel? So you really need to do your homework to go to those meetings. And that's something that you can study a lot, but you need to talk to that people to be able to know all potential cases, objections, and everything.
For the past two months, I've been living in Barcelona because I originally wanted to start like a social energy project in Barcelona as well. And I had the pleasure that I was founded by the German energy agency in order to conduct further research about this project and to see whether this concept could be adapted in Germany or not, and what really the greatest challenges as concept. Outside of Barcelona, we really set up a project But apart from this, we faced a lot of challenges as well. And during my research period, I really found out that there's a huge gap between what's in the law and what's being done in practice. Like you talk about these challenges, like the comercializadores, the electricity suppliers won't acknowledge these concepts, that they don't change the electricity tariff. So it takes up to 2 years in order for like a ready-made solar installation to be activated. And we're exploring the opportunity to start this concept in Mallorca, because Mallorca is a very, very dirty island in terms of electricity generation compared to Spain. So the CO2 footprint is 3 times as worse in comparison to Spain, and they have 78% of fossil generation. So I want to give it another shot and try to set up a small solar venture on Mallorca by now. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world, but they could really improve their electricity generation from my perception. This is basically a live map of the total world. For Europe, it's more precise. It lacks some data for the US and Africa, I'm afraid. But this basically shows how dirty our electricity generation is for every hour. And
sometimes you can see these headlines in the newspaper saying like, Spain is like 90% renewable energy working. But it's like one afternoon, right? Because it was sunny and a lot of wind. And then people stick with this headline, but with this map, you can see in real time what's actually happening. And we need to rely on real data.
Derive something from 1 hour from a day, this won't give you the right conclusions, I'm afraid. It's a super, super nice headline that Spain is totally renewable, but unfortunately, this is only half the truth, and you can kind of check this out with this map that Juan just provided. The vast majority of the society lives in flats, apartments, and does not really have an access to solar energy. And this is why we set up this sharing mechanism, which is basically about building huge solar installations, maybe on rooftops of industries or unused solar rooftops. And then we take this energy, instead of spilling it to the grid or reusing the energy, and kind of providing the people in apartments, in flats with the solar energy produced. We want to do this as simple as possible, because we engineers typically craft a very, very technical solution, but then the people, we're going out and tell the people, come on, understand this concept, and this will be good for you. But I don't think that the transition to renewable energy works like this. We need to kind of change our approach, talk to a lot of people up front, and make this as simple, as convenient as possible, that basically my 7-year-old cousin understands this concept, and we take all these concerns and doubts seriously in order to get everybody on board and really have a joint transition to renewable energy.
I think we need to talk about if it is financially convenient to put solar panels, or environmentally convenient to put solar panels, or use alternative energies, or vote for putting solar panels, talk to the neighbor about stuff like that, because I think not only the planet and the environment, but also the people is missing a financial opportunity. Another thing that I like about the project is that you are using current roofs, because I mean, solar parks, for example, are a really powerful source of energy, and I think they are good to some extent. But why to do more solar parks if we are not using our infrastructure, right?
But if you take a look at all our huge cities, for instance, Barcelona, or take Berlin or Hamburg, and you're just taking a look over the city, you see so much untapped potential, because we have these huge rooftops that connect the majority of our society that lives close by to these locations to renewable energy. And this is really the goal, I guess.
We went to one of the highest rooftops in Valencia, and we were looking around how many solar panels, and we barely could see like a couple of more solar panels like this. And it was like, oh my God, is this real? It's like, we need to do this.
I made exactly the same experience when I came the first time to Barcelona, and then the first day I walked to a mountain that is kind of outside of the city, and you can really see above the city. And I was kind of shocked and devastated when I firstly saw that there's, I said, this untapped potential, and on the other side there are maybe 100 solar panels, 100 solar panels installed in this whole city where basically 1 million people live. And I thought this can't be true, and there need to be something done about this.
But what I know is like quite competitive when it comes to the solar industry. There are a lot of activity. So imagine in the rest of Spain.
Yeah, you're right. And they're kind of wrote on their flag that they want to be the green capital of Europe. But like when you're lacking solar energy, or when you're lacking energy, and energy is basically the greatest contributor to global warming, how do you want to become a climate or green city? So
why did you agree to have this conversation with me?
I think it's basically all about sharing experience, because then people can learn from this experience. I love to hear podcasts from entrepreneurs as well, and maybe even inspire people, or giving some small ideas to people that kind of heard your voices or your words, my words, and came up with a new concept. And this is why I agreed to talk to you. And furthermore, I just enjoy talking to like-minded people. Especially I enjoy, or in Spanish we say encantar, talking to you as well.
There is a lot of noise on the internet, and when I see something like this, I like it, and it has inspired me a lot of times, and a lot of my knowledge goes from the internet. I think it's a really good way to connect to people, to make initiatives like this happen.
Why did you decide to start with your own venture as well?
If I see something that could be improved, and I have power to do so, I have a brain, I have hands, I have legs, I have a mouth to talk, I can do a lot of things to make this better, or at least to try it. And what if you don't try it? So you will never know what happens, right? Most of the time, it's better to try. And then if you have to fail, so you learn, right?
Even though this jump into the cold water might be very, very frightening, is that I think both of us can say that it's worth the jump.
Yeah, because cold water usually don't kill you, right?
So exactly.
Why do you do what you do?
Because I'm very privileged. So I was born in Germany. I experienced a very good education that I hadn't really properly paid for, and I did a good bachelor. And now we're like at the verge of losing something great, which is basically the fight against climate change. We have 6 more years to do something against this. And there's so many inspiring and motivated people around there that already took this step. And I said to myself, okay, if I won't take this step right now with my very privileged background, then I will be very, very disappointed in the future from myself. And this is basically, as we previously said, we don't have a lot of things to lose. And why, when not addressing this problem of climate change now, we will have a very, very severe time upcoming. And with every day waiting more, this will be harder to take a step.
I moved. I like what you say, Niels.
This is what it's all about: connecting similar-minded people, inspiring each other, helping out each other. And this is what I like about being in this environment as well. So really, really enjoyed this conversation with you. Just
likewise, Niels. Let's see what the butterfly effect gives to this conversation.